Hello, everybody, and I wanted to, for the last time, just say thank you so much for being here. This is our final keynote. This is our closing keynote for the Future Focused Educators Summit. We are very appreciative that you have stuck with us for the last 4 days, or some of you 3 days, and we're just super excited for our closer. So with that, you don't need to hear from me much anymore. I will make sure I say goodbye at the end, but I want to have the privilege of introducing Parfait and his keynote, Barriers and Keys to Belonging. So Parfait, I'm giving you the stage and it's all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrew. Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well. An amazing opportunity here as I was connecting with the organizers of this summit and just the premise behind it. And I agree, I concur that this is a very critical time in history where we find ourselves. And having this opportunity to engage with fellow educators in envisioning and thinking about what's next, what can we do going forward to get better outcomes in education is just an amazing feat. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to spend about an hour with you all. As Andrew mentioned, my name is Parfait Bassale. I am currently the Executive Diversity Officer at South Puget Sound Community College, and where we're doing a lot of work around transforming education, especially in higher ed. As you can see in my setup here, I'm also an artist, and part of what I like to do as part of my presentation is to weave in every aspect of my identity. We all are more than one single thing. And that's part of the conversations that we're trying to have in education, right? Is how do we create spaces where the whole individual, the whole student can show up and be accepted as they are, be supported as they are, and be supported to get to the outcomes, the shared outcomes of growing, transforming, and becoming valuable contributors to our society. So with that, Andrew, if you don't mind, switching us into some of the notes that I have prepared for us. So the title of our time together is titled, Barriers and Keys to Belonging. And I went back and forth with regards to a few potential iterations of this title, but I think that this is it. It's the notion of what gets in the way of belonging and how do we unlock, and what is the antidote to belonging. So that's what we're going to try to do in 1 hour. I will try as much as I can to not get super granular because this topic you can get lost in the weeds. But as a closing keynote, my hope is to one, inspire all of us to go back out there and do the transformation work that is required, but also provide you enough nuggets that you don't feel like it was too high level. And so with that, as I complete this presentation and you have additional questions or would like more details, some of the sources of this research, I will be happy to connect with you all. So Andrew, if you don't mind going on to the next slide. So I want to invite you quickly here into an activity. I want you to take a few instants and think about this summit. Some of you, as Andrew was mentioning, have been here, have been attending for the last 4 years, some of you 3. I just want you to take a moment and reflect about the summit to this point. How have you felt, what you have learned, and potentially where and when and how you could have engaged better. And I invite you to utilize the comments section to share some of those thoughts. You don't have to answer all those questions, just any one of those that resonate with you. I would like for you to go ahead and reflect and share that with this community that we have here. And Andrew, if you don't mind showcasing some of the things that are coming through the chat, it will be really great to see. What is your stock assessment of what the conference or the summit has been so far? How have you felt? What have you learned? Where, when, and how could you have engaged potentially better? right? Some themes are emerging here. You know, some folks have really felt inspired in many ways. Amber, thank you there for the comments. Right, you know, a sense of motivation. Some folks have wrestled a little bit with technology. You and me both. It was a scramble to get going here for myself as well. Right, people really, for sure, you know, technology getting in the way of the learning that could have happened. So thank you, and you can keep those popping. You can keep those coming. So why did I have you do this? Andrew, if you don't mind moving us forward into the next slide. Why did I have us do this? Is to set up the stage for a construct that I think is really critical to understanding this moment we're in, the notion of liminal space. Right, the notion of liminality is the idea that it's a transition time, the time between what was and the next. It is a place of transition, season of waiting and not knowing what would be. Right, it's also still a space where all transformation takes place. That's where you move from one state of being to another. Should we learn how to wait and let it form us, a lot can happen. Liminality has been a construct that I really, really resonate with as I try to make sense of this time we're in as a nation, thinking about education and historically how it just has not served all students, right? And the demands of society on the heels of George Floyd's death for greater equity, greater justice, and the promises of education. And so as educators, we find ourselves in this space where we know what has been. We know how things have been done. And we also know that they haven't lived up to the promise. But yet we stand here in that space and we're wondering, okay, what do we do? What's next? And so with that, I want to invite you into another activity now. And if you don't mind, Andrew, thank you so much for helping with the deck of cards there. So I want you to take a few moments now and think about the remaining 50 minutes that we have together, which will be the end of this summit, but yet a liminal space into your tomorrow in the classroom or at the college or in an educational space. I want you to think about how would you like to feel? What would you like to learn, contribute? Not only as it relates to this particular summit, but beyond, as you think about your role in education. So let's use the comments area again to try to capture some of the things that are coming for folks as you think about, right? So the liminal space is the space between what has been and what has yet to occur. And we've assessed a little bit where you've been this last 4 days or 3 days. And I invite you now to start thinking about what would your hopes be for tomorrow, and the week after, and the academic year coming. And Andrew, if you don't mind featuring some of the things that are popping up on the screen. Right. And so Pam here says she would like to learn something valuable and applicable to work and life. Great, thanks. Right. And Tommy is sharing that I want to be excited and competent and sense that my life experience will be valuable to my students and colleagues in the coming school year. And I invite you all to keep monitoring what's going on in the comments area. I think there's some great aspirational goals here for folks. Heather shares to be able to implement and connect in my learning community. And then let's see, Lauren would like to feel like a concrete plan on how to move forward. Great. So I invite you to continue nurturing, if you will, that liminal space in your mind because I like to say that liminality is constant. We are constantly in a liminal space, the space between the prior moment, prior way of doing things to the next possibility. And really keeping that in mind, I think empowers all of us to be able to make change and bring about transformation. So with that, Andrew, let's move along with the next slide. I want to tell you about a story. This is a story of Rosa Alba, who is a fictional character. However, the elements of her story are real because they've been picked from real life scenarios that have happened within an educational context. And so Rosa Alba, go ahead, Andrew, is a first generation college student filled with doubts and a sense of what is well known as imposter syndrome. Is higher ed for me? You know, nobody in my family history has ever attempted to get a college degree. Is that a place for me? Do I belong here? Next, Andrew. You know, curriculum and the classroom feel very unfamiliar as she navigates from one class to the other. There's just a sense of nothing relates to her lived experience. The examples in the curriculum, the illustrations, even the characters and the problems that are offered, nothing seems to connect, relate to her lived reality as a Hispanic student and also a first generation. Next slide. And then so she takes a math class, and unfortunately that's poorly in that class at the first quiz. And obviously you have this snowball effect of all these negative messages and internalized messages of, you know, not being adequate. And next slide. You know, the first comment then that she gets from the faculty to her poor performance is a sarcastic comment. Oh my God, way around to get the wrong answer. Next slide. And next slide. And unfortunately, that has a psychological impact on her. She reads through her new student packet and stumbles upon the area that says that in terms of advising and trying to get help, she needs to reach out to the advising department. So tries to get a hold of the advising department to start thinking about, hey, is this thing for me? I just took a class and my first quiz, I totally flunked it. What are the next steps for me? Go ahead, Andrew. And instead of being able to get a response to schedule a meeting or what have you, this is what she gets. An out of office message that, and you can see the area that I highlighted there, which starts with, the advising center is experiencing a high volume of traffic. I apologize in advance if my email response time is longer than 24 to 48 hours. So obviously, compounded to her experience so far, she feels like, oh, she's a bother, and really is discouraged, and really wondering if she should stick it through and stay in college. And as she's walking, heads down towards her car, she stumbles upon a brochure of a program. Next slide. Of a brochure of a program. Next slide still. That is called Ignite. You know, for context here, Ignite is a program that we have implemented at South Puget Sound Community College to support historically underrepresented students, low SES students, so low social and economic status students. And so on the brochure, as she's looking at information about that program, she's thinking, oh my gosh, that might be the solution, a sense of community that's going to help me be successful and navigate higher ed. But unfortunately, she notices that, oh goodness, I've missed the application deadline. No help to be found in this new ecosystem that is hers. And then she gets home after this depressing long day, right? Opens her inbox for last email to check her emails. And lo and behold, there was an email coming from the financial aid department. Next slide. That essentially informed her about an application that she has filed before for a petition, if you will, because she had poor grades in the previous quarter. And this is what it says: your appeal has been approved, and you are now on financial aid probation. She's confused. Probation, what in the world does it mean? And so she's confused, goes to bed. That's a storyline that is unfortunately so common in our schools. And let's imagine, so this has been, right? This is what has been and is, so unfortunately, a lot of time for a lot of students. As we imagine what could be, let's go into the next slide, Andrew. What if, and let's just power through those. What if Rosa, right, as a first generation student, as she's navigating various classes, classrooms, and curriculum, was reminded of her story as a first-generation student, right? Examples that illustrated the success of Hispanic students and or first-generation students who have tried to go through college and have done well, so that there's a sense of, oh, that is possible, because seeing, hearing is believing. And then what if, after performing poorly in her first math quiz, instead of that snarky message that she got a message that offered actually support, or a tutor, or a phone call even, saying, hey, seems like you've struggled in this particular course, in this particular test, how can we meet us? How can I support you? What if instead of that out of office message, right, there was actually someone who was there readily available to meet with her in order to answer the questions that she had? What if instead of a brochure that pointed to a service that she could not even use because she had missed the deadline, what if that program was designed in a way that actually had an ongoing enrollment model where she could have applied at any given time in order to get the support and the support that she needs as a student? Next slide. What if instead of that last or let's say with that out of office message, what if instead of the message that centered the department workload, she actually got a message that started like this: thank you for your email. I will respond to you as soon as possible, right? But please note that you may experience a delay in my communications, which feels different as a student because she's at the center of the concern of whoever wrote this email, instead of the advising center itself being the center of concern. And what if, next slide, the email that she got later that evening from financial aid, instead of leading with, you have been approved and you are in probation, actually congratulated her. So the language was not enigmatic, but actually was clear in a way that she had something she could celebrate. It was a celebratory message rather than one that focused on duties and must and regulation. And therefore, she would have felt a little bit better that evening after a long day. The reason why I started with this scenario is to help ground the next few minutes together on the reality of how folks experience our educational system, right? The manner in which we talk or not, the manner in which we connect, we build our systems, our services, whether intentionally or unintentionally, creates an experience for the student that makes them feel like, yes, you can hang in here. Yes, you belong. Or, I don't know, I'm a problem. I am, I don't see myself here, or I just don't have what it takes. So next slide. So with that as a grounding story, a little bit about myself, you probably picked up on the accent. The notion of where is home has been a never-ending question on my lips and on my mind. Because I was born in Benin Republic, tiny country here in West Africa, and then lived in Niger for a number of years before I moved to Senegal, most Western country on the African coast, and then moved further across the Atlantic to the United States to continue my education. One thing that has been common through my journey as a human being has been, where is home? Because every time I would move from one place to another, I was reminded that I did not belong. And sometimes it wasn't necessarily an explicit statement by people, right? But it was just based on cultural norms and expectations and habits of how things were communicated, what I was supposed to know, and things I was supposed to say or not say. And I was reminded constantly of where is home. And I cannot forget how I felt when I came to a college campus for the first time and how amplified that feeling of where is home was for me. And I would suggest, and we all know this in this space, right, that a lot of students, whether they're low income, first generation students from historically underrepresented groups, they have that question on their lips and their minds. Is this space for me? Is this home? Next slide, please. And the underlining aspiration or desire that I had, even though I couldn't necessarily articulate those at the time, and as I was moving from one place to another or trying to find my spot, my place in higher ed, the aspirations were those 4 bullets. I just wanted to be thought of. I just wanted to be seen. I just wanted to be heard. I just wanted to be cared for. That's all students are asking, right? And it's at an individual level. They want to feel like, oh, someone thought about me. Oh, someone is seeing me. Or someone is hearing me. Someone cares for me. Next slide. So that takes us to defining this notion of belonging. What do we mean by belonging? This definition here is adapted from Brené Brown's work on vulnerability. It's the notion that belonging begins when striving for worth, acceptance, and support ceases. The notion that I don't have to work for a sense of I have value. I don't have to work to feel like I'm accepted for who I am and what I bring to the table. And the notion that I don't have to strive and work hard to feel like someone's got my back. Someone or an organization wants to support me. And so the linchpin, if you will, to actually achieving belonging is the notion of empathy. And we'll unpack this a little further. Next slide, please. So any of you have taken classes in anatomy, I'm going to refer you back to some of that. And you may have seen a graphic like this before. It's a notion of antagonist and agonist muscles. So our bodies are made with these type of muscles. They have this relationship with each other such that when one is flexed and contracted, the other is relaxed. And you can try this out with your biceps, right? If you flex your biceps, your triceps muscles are automatically relaxed, and vice versa. If you flex your triceps muscles, then your bicep muscles relaxes. That's the relationship between the two. What I wanted to highlight here with this metaphor is that the notion of othering, which I'm introducing here as the key barrier to belonging, has an interesting relationship based on the research with empathy and empathizing. We are either othering or we are empathizing. There is no neutral space between those two. We are either actively working towards empathy so that someone feels like they belong, or through inaction and sometimes action, we are othering them. Next slide. And with that, let me share a more nerdy definition of what othering is. Next click. It's the notion that any action or inaction by which an individual or group is made to feel like an outsider, because they have become classified in somebody's mind or by a system as not you, not good enough, or you are this way, or you don't matter. And the outcome from the target standpoint is an experience of dehumanization. And what causes that is through neglect, apathy, or prejudice. And so notice here in this definition that othering, it doesn't have to be intentional prejudice. It can be through inaction. It can be through apathy, right? And so on the receiving end, the person who's othered, they just feel like I didn't matter to someone or to a system, or I was flagged as, oh, I'm this way, I'm this problem child, right? And so you experience it as dehumanization. Next slide. So that's the barrier. That's the barrier to belonging, othering. So what are these indices of othering? John Powell from the Institutes of Othering and Belonging in UCLA has done amazing work, and you can look him up. No, in Berkeley, I apologize. John Powell out of Berkeley, done a lot of work around othering and belonging. And all of his extensive research has pointed to these critical cues or clues to help us, educators, administrators, to get a sense of when someone is going through othering or experiencing othering. The first bullet is, Andrew, go ahead, is first the notion of lack of representation. Do I see myself Do I hear my story or aspects of my story? Can I imagine, do I resonate with elements of my lived experience in this particular space I'm in? And you can see, and the notion of representation here is not just visual. It can be representation through illustration. It can be representation through, I will say, music. It can be representation through analogy, and the list goes on. Can salient aspects of my identity be felt, seen in the space I'm in? The lack of that increases the chances of me feeling othered. Next item on that came up out of the research: the lack of visible support or care, right? The extent to which an individual, the extent to which a student feels like, oh my goodness, I have to climb Mount Kilimanjaro or the Everest in order to get support. To that extent, the student will feel like they're othered and that they don't belong, right? Care, support, the sense that you care about me, I get your best intentions in mind, has to be a low-hanging fruit. To the extent that it is hard thing to attain or to feel or to experience, makes othering more likely. The next item that came from the research is the little to no opportunity to tell one's story. There's something so important for us human beings to be able to have a voice in our experiences, to be able to share how we're experiencing something. And so the extent to which someone has no avenues or modalities to share how they're experiencing the classroom or experiencing the college, to that extent, they'll feel like, I am just a number, and I don't belong here. Last but not least, but very connected to this previous bullet, is the extent to which one actually has agency. The fact that the sharing one's voice is not just performative, but actually has effect, the ability to change one's experience. So can I, as I'm navigating the classroom, can I share how I'm experiencing the classroom in real time? Not as a summative feedback process, but a formative process where I can inform the teacher real time. This is how I'm experiencing your classroom right now, and for it to be consequential, where changes are made, accommodations are made, support systems are put in place to change how I'm experiencing this classroom. To the extent that those things are lacking, othering prevails. With that, going into the next slide, I think we have a repeated set here. Next slide. And so going back to our analogy of those muscles, right? If the biceps is othering, and the triceps is empathy, the counter response to othering is empathy. And what in the world is empathy? There's a lot of myth around about empathy as being something that is inherent or not. You know, some people say empathy is just something you're born with or not. It couldn't be further from the truth. Empathy is actually a very complex construct that includes, yes, some inherent traits, but a lot of the research points to the fact that it is mostly driven by prefrontal cortex activity. And so the notion of empathy really is that notion of engaging from a place of understanding and support towards greater understanding and support. What does it mean? Think about a spiral or an onion type of analogy, where anything you can do to try to understand what someone else's experience might be so that you can support them is you operating within a sphere of empathy. And then the end goal is just greater understanding and support, right? I'm trying to know you better, see how you're experiencing this so that you have the better sense of support, a greater sense of support, and we keep doing it and doing it. So let me just say off the bat that educating in this way, designing courses, classroom experiences, college experiences in that way requires a lot of effort, requires a lot of energy. And the elephant in the room here is that we don't pay our educators nearly high enough to do that kind of work. So for y'all decision makers out there, that's something to really keep in mind, because the new territory we're trying to go into, which is an empathetic form of education, equitable form of education that requires an understanding of where people are at and what they need in order to support them is a lot of work. So with that, next slide. Thank you, Andrew, again. I want to illustrate or share some various tools that various organizations use. I'm going to focus here on South Puget Sound Community College and some of the equity principles that we're using to try to get us to the outcome, right? To operate from a place of empathy in order to increase belonging for our students. The first principle that we're using as a North Star, if you will, is the notion that we want to center the people we serve and meet them where they are. Secondly, we want to continually identify barriers to academic and professional success and strive to remove them. That's the stance we want to have. And thirdly, but not least important, is we want to involve those most impacted when seeking solutions or making decisions. With these three guiding principles, we are trying to center ourselves in the research that tells us that, folks need to feel supported in a very visible and tangible way. They need to feel like they have a voice in their experience, and they also need to feel like they're heard, seen, and they can connect and resonate with our organization. So whatever it's going to take you, whether organizationally or in your classroom, in order to do belonging work, you have to ground yourself in some pillars, in some principles, in some guiding principles to help you in every situation be able to hold yourself accountable and say, okay, this is a hard one. This is a situation that is uncomfortable, that I haven't seen before, or even frustrating situation, but being reminded by some principles on, okay, because it's a muscle, right? The empathy muscle is not something that just comes by default. We have to work at it. And so having carefully drafted principles or frameworks to guide you in that work is paramount to achieving that outcome. Next slide here. So that takes us to a critical space here in our presentation. It's a story that I want to share that I hope will help ground this theory a little bit further. The outcome of this story really is an invitation, if I can phrase it that way. It's an invitation for each one of you to say, yes, as I navigate this liminal space that we're in as a nation, yes, I will answer the call to be a bridge. What is that story? Here we go. Those of you who are familiar with the DI space, you might have heard the name of Lee Moon-hwa, who is a renowned movie maker. He's most known for having directed the movie, the documentary titled "The Color of Fear." And I was really privileged a few years ago as I attended a conference, the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity and CORE. It was out in Portland, and I was there with some colleagues from the college. And then this was a 3-day long conference. And by the end of the first day, I was just drawn out. I was exhausted, emotionally spent, given all the information that was borderline depressing. As you look at the state of affairs with regards to equity and diversity, I was just really emotionally drained from that, the first session. So as I went back to my hotel room, I remember just crashing on my bed there and slept straight up to the next morning. And so as I woke up the following morning, I'm looking at my app, my conference app, and trying to get a sense of what's the next workshop will be. And so there's this incredible workshop that I had signed up for. At that time, I didn't know who Lee Moon-hwa was, but the title of the presentation was just really, really fascinating for me. And so I dragged my feet because I was still recuperating from the emotional fatigue from the previous day. And as I made my way sluggishly through the conference floor and I approached the workshop location for my first morning session, I was still about, let's say, 20 to 30 feet away from that particular room. And what happened was I noticed a sea of people on the outside. And so I was puzzled. So first I was blaming myself for not having left the room soon enough. I was like, oh, darn it. I wish I left earlier. And as I got closer to the crowd, I'm about 5'11", 5'11", just to give you a sense visually here. And I was poking through the crowd, trying to get a sense of what was going on in the classroom. And goodness gracious, everybody was having the time of their lives. You know, this presenter, Lee Moonwa, was just having a blast. He was funny. People were laughing. And so I felt like I was missing out, right? So I literally was experiencing the outsider experience. I was out there. Some people were in, they were having a blast. I wish I had been in. And in the midst of that internal conversation, two individuals come and they go past the crowd. They figure out a way through the crowd. And next thing, they are sitting by the projector, enjoying the party. And I am livid at this point. And everybody outside we are looking at each other, having this nonverbal communication, essentially telling each other, what in the world just happened? Did this really happen? Did they just cut through the line and found themselves inside? And so we were frustrated with each other about the situation. And I was about to leave and go to an alternative session when I made eye contact with Lee Moonwa. And so I see Lee Moonwa waving, essentially a sign of invitation. And so I internalized it. I felt like he was inviting me personally, right? And I didn't want to replicate what had just happened. And so I looked at people in front of me and I said, hey, you go ahead. And they were like, no, you go, right? Nobody wanted to go. And so next thing, here I was sitting by the projector as well. And fast forward, this was the 90 minutes, the most amazing 90 minutes of my professional career in terms of professional development. I learned so much. I was just astounded. And so I lingered behind at the end of the workshop in order to engage this presenter and thank him for having made space for me in his classroom. And here it comes. As we are exchanging, I first ask him this, I thank him obviously. And then I ask him, well, how did you notice me? Like you were in the middle of a presentation, there was so much going on. How did you notice me? And he said, well, because I was once the man standing at the door. And it hit me. I was like, interesting. And then we kept talking a little bit more and we exchanged business cards and he gave me his personal business card and he told me, you know, reach out to me anytime. All you had to say when you reach out to me is say you were the man standing at the door. Actually, I flipped the story a little bit. That's where it started. Say, hey, Parfait, all you got to do when you reach out to me is just to say you were the man standing at the door. The fact that he used that wording to name me was really heart-wrenching. There was a label that I had never put together, but experientially, it was my story. As an immigrant, as I told you earlier, always wondering where is home. When he was able to put it into those words, I felt like he named me. I felt like he knew me, that he knew my story. And there was something just transformational that happened in that moment. And then when I asked him, well, how in the world did you notice me? He said, well, I was once the man standing at the door as well. And so at the end of that story, I went back to the hotel. I actually never went back to any other sessions. And I unpacked this story because it was transformational for me. And here are a few things that I want to share with you all related to that story and related to the bigger conversation around belonging. Andrew, if you don't mind taking us to the next slide. It's essentially the notion of unpacking who those key characters of the story are. So as you heard this story, you know, using the comments area, can you quickly share with me who do you see as the key characters or players in this story, right? Because I would tell you that those characters are situational characters in our educational spaces. and they are always there. And understanding that those characters are there and that they're situational and that we all can be those characters at any given time is going to be key for thinking about how we make transformation in our spaces. So which characters do you identify as part of the story? So the listener is a key character. So the presenter, right? So Lee Moon-hwa, yes. Any other characters that come to mind as you try to recall, process the story that I just shared? So obviously me, the people who allowed you to enter before them, right? So the people on the outside, the outsiders, I would say. I was me, a character, and the insiders, those inside, correct, right? So great, the crowd. So Drew, and we can categorize those folks, as we see fit. But here are 4 characters that I really thought are very, very interesting to zero in as we think about belonging as a whole. So Andrew, go ahead. First slide here is the outsider, me. And I wasn't the only one, but I'm gonna personalize it, right? So me, I was on the margins. There was clearly a party there, and I couldn't get in. Next group of characters here was who I chose to call the well-adjusted. So these were the 2 individuals, right? Yeah, Sarah, I think you got it. But these actually were, 2 individuals. I didn't give them a gender yet, but 2 individuals who cut through everybody, right? There's something about their lived experiences that as they walked there, they didn't see any barriers. They didn't see any walls. They were like, you know what? I know how to navigate this. That works for me. I'm going to find a way. And then here I am. I'm enjoying the party. Whereas for me and those outside, there was something that conditioned us in our stories to stop, right? Third, but not least, right, the bridge, who's the teacher, the facilitator. Something about his lived story has allowed him or equipped him to be a bridge, to notice those on the outskirts and take a stance of invitation and say, I see you, I see the barriers, and I'm going to intentionally invite you in. I'm going to make it work. I might have, I can tell you that Lee Moon-hwa that day probably broke some fire codes law rules there, but he was so committed to creating access and support that was not the chief concern. And last but not least, less visible in that particular story is the person I call the gatekeeper, the person who made the decision to assign one of the smallest classrooms or workshop rooms to one of the most prominent and popular presenters at that conference. And by so doing, because of that gap, created barriers for many, or if I could say, because of that decision, birthed many outsiders as a result. The gatekeeper who makes the decisions, craft the policies, the norms, created or birthed a number of outsiders as a result. So with that, let's go into the next slide. This is a graphic representation for those of you who are a little bit more visual of the characters and their interaction with each other, right? So when you're thinking about belonging in general, you have these players. You have the environment itself. What is an environment? Decoration, colors, representation, painting. Is there accessibility, right? And you name it. But then you have the individual, the self, me, in this case, the outsider. Something about my lived story, my own traumas, my internalized messaging that is a variable. Then you have the well-adjusted to the status quo, those who are totally comfortable with what was and will be as long as there's breath, right? So the people. So you have the self, the people, the environment. And as part of the people, you have 3 situational roles. Those who are well-adjusted to the way things have been, the gatekeeper, those who decide how things remain, and the bridge, those who say, I want to bridge for the outsider. I want to advocate, I want to connect, or I want to translate. So with that, when the bridge steps on the scene and does what the bridge does, it feels very special for the outsider. like I was made to feel at that conference. And so I'm going to share a song here with you all. I believe is the next in line here on the deck. A song that let's fast forward to the YouTube video there. Or actually, let's pause it. Thank you, Drew. So the idea here is when the bridge steps on the scene, and that's what the bridge does. If we were to unpack what Lee Moon-Hwa did, is the idea that the bridge identifies the outsider and engages the unfamiliar, right? The bridge connects to the outsider's story through whatever means necessary. Next, the bridge advocates and innovates, figure out solutions so that the barrier is removed. That's what the bridge does. So next slide. Right, and the bridge also obviously involves the outsider. So when you look at what the bridge does and then how the outsider experiences it, let's look at the next few items on the slide. As a result, the outsider feels seen and heard. Next, feels supported and cared for. Next, feels involved. That's how belonging is done. Now, next slide. Ultimately, when we talk about belonging, we're talking about the outsider feeling like I'm at home. this is home. I can hang here because I feel like I'm seen, I'm heard, I'm supported, I'm cared for, I'm involved in shaping my experience in this space. That's what home is. So I want to share with you all a song titled Faceless Love. That is a shout out of what it means to be a bridge. It's a song that I wrote years ago as I was thinking about, through my own college experience, the people who were bridges for me as an international student, immigrant, navigating American society. So we'll take a minute and engage with that, and then we'll approach some closing.
With all this pain and all this confusion, I was like a pilot in peril. I had no hope, no clear ambitions. I had no stake in tomorrow. Then you came to me with selfless intentions. Show me the life in my sorrow. You held me up and said no words. You taught me how to be my own hero. I found myself again. I found myself again. I found myself again. Yes, I found myself again. Because of your love, because of your love. I'm not the same, I surely came a long way. Though I am weak, I am strong. I feel no shame, no matter the loss or gain. I now can sing this song. You came to me with selfless intentions. Show me the life in my sorrow. You held me up and said no words. You taught me how to be my own hero. I found myself again. I found myself again. I found myself again. Yes, I found myself again. I found myself again. I found myself again. I found myself again. Yes, I found myself again because of your love. Because of your love. Faceless love, selfless love, courageous love. Because of your love. Faceless love, selfless love, courageous love. Because of your love.
Thank you, Andrew. So like I was saying earlier, I wrote this song as a shout out to those who were bridges on my personal journey, and as a reminder to myself as an educator of what I would like to be, how I would like others to experience my activism, my advocacy, my support. And so I was sharing the song as an invitation to you all to be bridges, to identify who the outsiders are, those standing at the door of spaces that you have control over. And through your action, your deliberate advocacy, your deliberate accommodation and problem solving and innovation, transform their existence, their experiences to a point where they can sing a song like that to thank you for your work. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for engaging with this presentation. And that's what I had for you all. Andrew, if you don't mind putting on the screen the last slide, which has my contact information. For those of you who wish to stay in touch or contact me for further inquiries, I would love that very much. So thank you very much. And I think if we have a few more moments or questions, if anyone wants to ask questions, I'll certainly be open to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Parfait. And I'm a little emotional from your song, and I'm sure most of our audience is as well, and your story, and thinking about the outsiders, especially since schools are about to begin, and how many of our students feel that way, and all the things we can do to help invite them in and get rid of those barriers. So thank you for being here with us and being our closing keynote. We do have a couple minutes for questions. So if anybody would like to ask some questions in the chat, I feel free to encourage you to do so at this point, and we'll bring them up.
I think I caught a question that came through. Yeah, thank you, Andrew, about sharing the link. Absolutely, feel free to share it and use it if that will be helpful for you in your teaching endeavors.
Okay, I just put the link to the song in the chat. You're getting a lot of thank you messages, so I'll throw a couple of those up on the screen. So Kathy, love this keynote speaker. Thank you for your imaginary and powerful message. What a wonderful wave to ride into a new school year.
You bet. Thanks, Kathy. Thank you.
Okay, is there any more questions, anybody? We have a couple more minutes. So Tommy, how did you discover your passion? You're a professional now, so you obviously found something you wanted to pursue. So how did you discover your passion?
Great, thanks, Tommy. Great question. Just for clarity, I'm an administrator in higher ed, and obviously teach a lot through trainings and stuff. How I discovered it, I think it's been a combination, one of following my own interests, right? Being in tune with the things that excite me, that I like to do, that I get life out of as I do them. And also paying attention to opportunities that and doors being shut and doors opening. And so there's a mix of serendipitous plus being authentic and true to myself. Do I enjoy doing these things? I always knew that I love being in front of people. I get excited when I'm sharing information and people are resonating with it and things are making sense and clicking. And so that gave me a sense that I really wanted to be an educator. And I care about bringing people together. It brings me life. And so that's how I got into the DI field. And that would also tie with my own story. So.
Okay, we're getting a couple of requests. If you'd be willing to share your slide deck, are you comfortable if I get that out to them with the video once we caption it?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So this will be part of the resources that we do provide in an email after the summit closes. Give us a little over a week because we have to organize everything. Another question. Do you speak at schools or do online talks?
Both, absolutely. I love it. I thrive in it. So I do keynotes, I do workshops with professional development. So just reach out and we'll figure out what you need. I'll be happy to support your organization that way.
There's a personal question. Can you tell us about your name? It is lovely.
Well, I appreciate you asking and not assuming that it has something to do with the dessert, which I get a lot. Not to get into too much details, Parfait is a French word. Like I said, I'm originally from Benin in West Africa, which was formerly colonized by the French. And so there's a lot of names that are borrowed from the French language in that area. So that's the little history of it. That's where it comes from. Nothing to do with the dessert.
Perfect. Okay, let's see. Is there any other questions? Once again, lots of thank yous. Wonderful presentation, encouraging words, self-awareness and confidence equal excellent. Oh, what brought you to the Olympia area? It was a professional move.
As I mentioned earlier, I'm currently the executive diversity officer at South Puget Sound Community College. So that was the reason for the move. I was previously in Portland, Oregon. And so it made sense for the professional opportunity, but also my wife is actually originally from Olympia, Washington. So it was a coming back home for her. And so we really love this community. It's small enough to be able to raise kids who are known by their community. And so that was a very important thing for us, the sense of community, and big cities don't provide it to that same extent as smaller cities. So, yeah.
Okay, I have one more question before we close it that I don't see anybody having in the chat. Do you have other inspirational songs out there?
Yes. It looks like the music really resonated, so which means a lot. If you go onto YouTube or on my website, there's a lot of songs that I have recorded as well. I do have some of my music available on Spotify and most streaming platforms. So if you just look up Parfait, Bassale, you should be able to get that. So there's a lot of music out there.
Perfect.
Thank you for being interested in that.
Okay, so with that, everybody, it looks like it's about time that we are going to officially close the Future Focused Educator Summit. I couldn't have thought of a better way to close it than with Parfait being our closing keynote. So once again, I'm going to just thank you for being here with us. Truly inspiring. And I think that we're all going to be ready for a great year to start thinking about the future, thinking about everything moving forward. I am so appreciative that you all stayed with us, that you engaged in the fun participant activities. And I need to send us off with a huge thank you to all of our keynotes that we had through the summit. I need to thank our partners, OSPI, WASA, AWSP, CSTEP, AWSL, and many, many more. So thank you, partners, for joining us with the AESD. Thank you to my other leadership members that helped put this on. Catherine, Christina, and Shiloh could not have done this without you. Thank you to our participant experience team, the team behind the back scenes that were making sure yoga was running and paint and wine night was running and everything. So this had a huge team that put this all together. I just wanted to thank everybody for all your hard work. And especially thank you, educators. And I do consider you all educators, no matter if you're a bus driver, if you're office staff, if you're an informal educator, anybody. Thank you, educators, for all the work that you do with students. And we are just so appreciative of all your hard work. And I really hope that you have an amazing year. It's definitely going to be different, but we think of the future. So thank you, everybody. And with that, we're going to sign off. And this closes the summit. So thank you, Parfait.
Thank you, everybody.
Hope everyone has a great year.